here with us. And also, thank you. And, so, well, you know, I really don't know where to start. David is a legendary figure. And yeah, well, I would like to tell you that, you know, the memories of playing Zack McCracken and Indiana Jones are among the happiest of my childhood. So I'm very excited, you know, to be here with you. Well, David Fox is one of the founders of the game division of Lucasfilm. And at Lucasfilm, he was part of a legendary team with Ron Gilbert, among others. He co-developed the Scam engine, we talk about it. And he co-created Zack McCracken, Indiana Jones, and many others video games. David, it's really a pleasure to have you here, and I'm gonna leave you the floor, and you have, well, 1 hour, 1 hour and 50, take all the time you want, and after David's presentation, we'll have time for discussion, questions, etc., etc. Thank you again, and please.
Well, thank you for the very warm welcome, and this is my first time in Italy. It's been on our wish list for years that we wanted to come here, and the opportunity, Marco invited us to come. We said, wow, yes, of course, I'd be happy to. So thank you, I'm honored to be here. I gave a presentation about 14 years ago in both Oslo and Helsinki, and this was the basis of that presentation. And then I realized back then when I did it, there really wasn't much of a YouTube, so I had to use slides to update it now with actually videos from I could pull off of YouTube. And it was really fun to go back and you know, instead of a throwback presentation, you bring it up to more present time. I would like to start. So I want to talk about my time at LucasArts, so Lucasfilm Games, and specifically the games that I did that were, you know, had some kind of a film tie-in. And thinking back, pretty much all of them did in one way or another, even if they weren't film-based. So we'll talk about that. So where did it start? Well, for me, it started, you know, with Lucasfilm. It was, now it's owned by Disney, but it was a small privately owned company in Marin County, California. Marin County is just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, north of San Francisco. It's kind of a upper middle class, relatively wealthy community, but parts are fairly, you know, there's lots of diversity, so it's not just pure white. And George Lucas did this film called Star Wars in 1977, and he didn't want to be a Los Angeles filmmaker. He grew up in middle of California in Modesto and didn't really like the Los Angeles Hollywood scene, so he ended up wanting to build a film company in Marin County where he lived. And so we all know Star Wars. I saw the film in 1977, probably the first day or two it came out. I had heard about it at one of the one or two only science fiction conventions I went to. They had some previews, and I said, wow, this is really great, I want to see this. I had no idea how good it was going to be and how much it would affect me. And then a few years later, there was this other film, Empire Strikes Back, and around that time, you know, George was looking at alternate ways to do the special effects and technology. He had Industrial Light and Magic, which did all the effects for the films, and they were using it the old way, which was, building models and doing stop motion photography. They actually came up with something called Go Motion, where rather than taking a picture of a still object, they would actually have it in motion for that frame, so you get a little bit of motion blur by having it look like it was actually moving, which helped with the realism of it. But it's still a lot of work to build all these different models and then having to do single steps. And he knew that there might be something coming up with computers that would help. So they commissioned this 3D animation company in Los Angeles, Information International Inc., to try doing a version of X-Wing Fighter. And it looked pretty good, but it took, like, I don't know if it was days or weeks to render one frame at the time. It was just enormously expensive. I think it was, I don't know if they had much in the way of texture maps and things like that, technology that we have now, that made it look too pristine, to make it dirty it up a bit. But the thinking in 1980 was that at the time, computers and storage just too slow, too expensive, but they're getting faster and cheaper. And you saw what the trend was. So we should be able to do this with computers eventually. So let's find the best computer graphics people around and create a new division within Lucasfilm to research this and to figure out how they could do it. And what was born was Lucasfilm Computer Division. That's a picture of the back of my jacket. We all got these call them bowling jackets, right, silver jackets. And they started doing their research to see whether they could do something that would work in a few years or a few decades. Around the same time, Annie, my wife Annie, right there, and I were doing something else in computers. We had just opened the Marine Computer Center, and it was a nonprofit educational microcomputer center. We started off with 10 computers, and people would come in and visit the computer center. They'd rent time, like $1.50 an hour on computers. No one had microcomputers at the time, so this was pretty much it. And there I am on the left, and there's Annie standing next to me. We ended up renting a library from a school, I think this is an elementary school, that had closed down because there weren't enough students, kids. So this is right, soon after that they had to start opening new schools, but at that point they had these empty schools. So they rented it to us at a really low price. We had 5,000 square feet of space, 2 classrooms, and it was just great. It's a great location. We would do, we had birthday parties, we had field trips, we had classes where we taught basic programming and basic to kids and to adults. This was an article that came out. You can see that there is my first computer game I did that got put in a magazine was a Star Wars game. It's called Star Wars Hodge, which is basically just looking at words in a grid, trying to pick out words that are familiar, and I changed the program so it was just Star Wars words, and was hoping they wouldn't come after me. There's Annie. Those are our processor technologies, Solve 20 computers. They were an 8080 base computer. The company went out of business maybe a few years after, 4 or 5 years later. I actually had the option of getting this other computer called the Apple II, and went to this company that just started up. They were just got ready to release their computers, and I drove down to Cupertino, California, and there's these 2 guys with black hair, like a lot of beards, and their names were Steve, and they both started trying to sell me on this computer, like I should get these instead. There was no one else there, just these 2 guys and a whole bunch of these Apple IIs on counters. And I asked if it could do upper and lower case, and they said no, just uppercase. And I said, well, I can't do any upper and lower cases. I figured everyone would be coming in and doing word processing on our computers. I didn't realize it'd be mostly game playing, and that I wish I had the color and the sound that we didn't have with this. there I am in the upper right, and there's Annie. And we, this is an example of a field trip. Annie would hold up, would show a computer and ask the kids, how many of you have ever seen or touched a computer before? And you might get 1 or 2 kids out of a group of 25 or 30 that had ever even seen one before. So this is like right in the beginning of this whole thing. We felt like we were kind of helping usher in the computer age, getting people used to it. We weren't selling computers, we just were educating people about it. One of the most popular games we had was called Star Raiders. And we put it onto our big screen TV, we had an Advent video projector, and kids would run time on that. And I just really was enamored with it. It also had, I'm sure it was inspired by Star Wars also. It was like the hyperspace jump sequence. For some reason, the enemies look like TIE fighters. I'm sure this wasn't licensed. But there was something very, very immersive about this. A few years later, while we were still at the Computer Center, I co-wrote a book called Computer Animation Primer. It's actually available online, so you can scan the whole book, so you can actually just look at it and go through the whole book. And half of the book was animation on the Atari 800. This was an example of something inspired by the trench in Star Wars, again. I wanted to get the feeling of speed going really fast, and there was a trick called color cycling where you could just change the color registers, which color would be showing, and get an effective motion. The other half of the book was looking at state-of-the-art in film at the time. Tron, the movie, had come out recently. There was this work that this newly created computer division at Lucasfilm had done on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And they let me visit and got to interview the guys, hang out with, it was guys and women, men and women, hang out with them, and get a lot of really good information and pictures for the book, and actually have a flip book in the corner where you could flip through and see animated sequences from some of their work. Here's an excerpt from the Genesis effect that they created for Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Fascinating.
The reformed moon simulated here represents the merest fraction of the Genesis potential, should the Federation wish to fund these experiments to their logical conclusion.
So what I really liked was, I remembered this, and I loved the whole idea of these fractally generated landscapes, and I'll come back to that in a bit. Meanwhile, there was this other company down south from where we were called Atari, and they had this little game system, Atari 2600 VCS, also 1977. I think there were about 40 million of these shipped in its lifetime, about 900 titles. And they started, a few years later, in 1982, they started this is around right before Return of the Jedi was going to be released. George decided to form some kind of a group to do high-tech entertainment outside of film. He knew this new group would be part of the Lucasfilm Computer Division, and he actually received $1 million from Lucasfilm funding from Atari. So they kind of created this joint venture to do this. Peter Langston, this guy who was known for doing games, had a thing called the PSL tapes. He did games that universities ended up, students playing on their CRT terminals. And got lots of press, and Atari Lucasfilm joint venture was created. and around the same time that Peter was hired, I had just finished my computer animation book. I had the manuscript, and one of the members at the computer center told me that they're going to form this new group, and I should maybe talk to them. So, well, okay. So I immediately called up Ed Catmull, who was the head of the Lucasfilm computer division, and asked to be interviewed about this. And I had already met him, so it wasn't like coming in cold. And when Peter started 3 weeks after that, I brought my manuscript, and because Atari was the partner, and then my book was on the Atari, it was like kind of like I had this advanced information that, okay, first you got to be in Marin County, then you have to write a book on computer animation on the Atari, and go talk to these guys at Computer Vision, and then when they start up the whole thing, then you'll be in the right position to do it. But in retrospect, it looked really perfect in terms of timing. I don't know how I managed to do that. So I was the third person hired. Peter was the first. Guy named Rob Poor transferred from his position as he was working on a laser printer to print film directly rather than having to use any other techniques. And I guess he didn't like that as much as the idea of doing games, so he transferred over. Then I was hired, so I was the third employee. This is an article from Atari Connection, 10 tips from the programming pros, and it's actually a good article. You can probably find it online. This was spring of 1984, and here's the picture, and this was the initial, pretty much the initial team. It was Charlie Kellner, Dave Levine, Peter Langston. There's me, Lauren Carpenter, and Barry Winnick. And Lauren was actually. He was the one who did the fractal landscapes. He was a part of the computer division, but he became because we became office mates. I'm ahead of myself for a second. So the plan was to build 2 throwaway games, and by that I mean here we are coming into this company that had done 2 huge films, the first two Star Wars films. And we were expecting the third one probably would do pretty well too. And we knew that we were going to be compared to those films. And it was really scary to come into this company and have people have such high expectations for us that it felt like anything we would do would just fall short compared to the films. So the idea of doing throwaway games was that just experiment, do some research work, see what you could do, play with it, don't worry about it, we won't ship it if it's not good. If it's not any good, we'll just throw them away and we'll start over. So that took a lot of the pressure off. And one of the games Dave Levine created was called Ball Blazer, and it actually did get published. My game was called Rescue on Fractalus, and the idea was kind of Star Raiders, and the feeling of getting this visceral first-person point of view speed game, but on a planet. And so it was kind of Star Wars, but not Star Wars. In fact, the first thing I found out, like within the 2 days of being there, was that we were not allowed to do Star Wars games, which was a huge. I came to the company to be in Star Wars in some way or another, and I couldn't do a Star Wars game. And that was because all the licenses for Star Wars, exclusive licenses, had already been sold to other companies. Like Atari had the coin-op license for the cabinets for the big coin-op games, and Parker Brothers had it for home games, and that was it. So we could do anything we wanted to except Star Wars. So I wondered whether fractals, like those fractal mountains we saw, could somehow be implemented on a microcomputer. And because our own office spaces weren't ready when we first started, I was put into Lauren's office. And again, we already spent time together, so we knew each other, and it was cool. And one of the first days I was there, I asked Lauren, hey, is it possible to do something like the Genesis effect, with fractal mountains, on a microcomputer? And he laughed and said, no way. And then, I saw that something kind of tweaked. I think he take it as a challenge, and he said, well, maybe there might be a way. So he ended up borrowing an Atari 800, taught himself 6502 assembly language, and in 2 days came back with a simulation of running flying through this landscape, a fractal landscape, which ended up being the basis for the game. So I really wanted this experience to feel like you were flying an X-Wing, even though we weren't, of course. I wanted the same kind of experience in this film.
Use the Force,
But I couldn't do that exactly. But I got as close as I could, so I asked for photos of the X-Wing's instruments, look at the user interface. I got to see a real X-Wing cockpit and photos of it. And so, okay, I have all this, I have something I can use as a model for inspiration, so let's take a good look at it. Actually, when you get closer, it's not that impressive. They did a good job of making it as looking very complicated, but when you look at it up close in full light, it looks pretty bad. But that's okay. It was still an X-Wing. So I studied it, I tried everything, and I faithfully adapted it for the Atari 5200. This is my drawing, and this is about what I figured we could do. Here's how it actually looks inside the game. And let's take a look at the game. This was added after the first version because we needed something to look at while the disk was loading all the information into memory. This is the mothership. And you're being launched out of it. And this is the point of view. Now see if you recognize the color cycling technique that I stole for myself. And the atmosphere, which I stole from the Genesis effect. You're going through the fog, and then you see the landscapes. And this is running on an Atari 800 or 5200. The goal was to find pilots on the ground that had been shot down, land, open your airlock, so turn off the engine so your shield was turned off, and the pilots will run to you. When they get to you, they'll knock on your airlock door, and you should open the door. If you don't, they'll die eventually because of the atmosphere. And then you take off and try to find another pilot. And later on in the game, you find out that something strange can happen. There's another pilot. And something's different in his head.
It's green.
Green head. Oh no, what's that? And you take off. And this is I guess people consider that to be the first jump scare in a video game. And because we, well, I'll come to that in a second. So when I was designing the game, in the original design, I didn't have any shooting. I figured, okay, we have fractal landscapes. I don't want to have people shooting these other, even if they're aliens, I don't want that in the game originally. So the idea was all the guns had been removed from inside the ship to make more space for pilots you had to rescue. You're essentially an ambulance. To destroy the enemy, you would have some ace flying. You'd fly really well through these mountains and make hard turns, and the aliens following you would just crash into the mountains and they died. That was it. So in retrospect, that was a really dumb idea. But that's what I showed to George Lucas. And first thing he asked was, "Where's the fire button?" And I said, "Well, there is no fire button because you're just rescuing pilots." And he asked me if I made that choice because it served the gameplay, made it a better game, or if it just served my personal values. And I had to tell the truth. I added a fire button. He also had the brilliant idea for the aliens being pilots. He wanted to add more tension to the game. There should be some tension. So Gary Winnick, at the time, wasn't working for us. He came on as a contractor. He did some concept art of what the aliens could look like. And I just discovered this. I forgot that I even had this when I was going through my boxes. So you're probably the first audience to see this picture. And he got down to what their their biology, what their feet look like. There's another one I have which shows their footprints. And then he did the animation afterwards, since we decided that this is what we liked. So it was really important to us to keep this Jaggy monster secret. And as a result, we got Atari to buy off on that. It never showed up in any of the press releases. It was only hinted at in the manual. In the very end of the manual, there's this radio transmission we transcribe of a downed pilot, seeing something strange happening and dying. We don't know what happened. And we set it up so that the first, I think, 8 levels, you never see one of these. So you're actually getting really used to opening the airlock. In fact, often the player would open the airlock in anticipation before the pilot knocks. And then all of a sudden, one time when this happens, you find there's a Jaggy inside your ship, tearing it apart, and you try and take off, and the ship's going rocking, and if you have your airlocks closed, then he'll pop up front, but you could turn on your shields and kill him. But after the first time, people freaked, and I have these stories of here's when I first played Rescue on Frackless when I was in college. One night when I was alone in my darkened dorm room, I was playing the game for the first time. It was around midnight, and I hadn't slept in almost 2 days. And the Jaggy jumped up on the windshield. I let out a scream and woke up my neighbors on either side of me, and I fell off my chair. My neighbors came knocking on the door, wondering what the hell had happened. And that's a gaming memory I'll always cherish. So even as the designer of this, during playtest, I remember every time I see a pilot coming, because later on in the game, the Jaggies got smart enough so they disguised their green head. You couldn't even tell until they got to you whether they were a Jaggy or not. I'd feel an adrenaline rush, even though I knew what did the coding, I knew what the chances were, and all that. It would still kind of get my adrenaline going, getting ready to push the right button. So we brought in ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, to help us with the box cover and the manuals. By then, they had already won 5 Academy Awards for visual effects for the various movies they'd worked on. Models were built, we did photo shoots, and they actually built a cockpit of the Valkyrie fighter, which is the ship you're flying. Complete with blast marks. They built maybe it was about this maybe half a meter model of a fighter, what it actually looked like. They also did models for Ball Blazer, and they did the Jaggy saucer. And it's kind of funny. I mean, we knew that you weren't going to really see the saucer very well in the manual. This is pretty much it. It's this little dot in the very front of the box. But the guy, Wesley Seeds, I think his name is. Let me go back because I like his name. Wesley Seeds. Had been, working on 3 films where all he got to do were X-Wings and TIE Fighters. And he was just so excited to do something like a saucer. And he spent all this time working on it, and so detailed. And this is pretty much all you see in the manual. It's just like a little tiny blue thing. So what happened to the computer division? afterwards as they left. Does anyone know what happened?
Yes.
Yes? Yell it out if you know. What was the name of the division after Steve Jobs bought it?
Pixar.
Yes. So the same team ended up at Pixar, where they really wanted to do movies. They didn't want to do research anymore, and they got to be free to do that. Then, in 1986, anyone know what these two guys worked on? The name of the film? Labyrinth. Yes, Jim Henson and George Lucas. They brought in this other guy named Kim Murray, and they released this film called Labyrinth. And this was, they came to us and they said, okay, would you be interested, not you, me, but our division, our group, in creating a game based on this film? And I guess they felt like they, because it wasn't, Family Jewels, it wasn't like Star Wars, it wasn't Indiana Jones, they felt, safer to have us try it, so if we messed it up, it wouldn't be a huge problem. And I don't think we knew that. That's kind of what we guessed. Here's the trailer that came out.
TriStar Pictures announces the collaboration of three extraordinary talents. Jim Henson, creator of The Muppets and Dark Crystal.
Where you go with a head like that?
George Lucas, creator of the Star Wars saga.
So what you're trying to do here is look at all this footage that we got. We got a lot of stills, that's some early footage, and how can we use that in the game to make it feel like you're actually in that world?
Anything seems possible, and nothing is what it seems.
That's the coolest thing.
The world of Labyrinth.
Yes.
So this was our first opportunity to actually prove ourselves and to show that we could actually do something with a movie license. And as I said, we got to see the script, we saw videos, and then in 1986, soon after we decided we'd do the project, we ended up getting on a plane, going to London for a week. There's Charlie Kellner, Steve Arnold, who was our general manager at the time, Brenda Laurel, who was the producer from Activision. We weren't publishing our own titles yet, so Activision was going to publish this. Plus, we got to meet Douglas Adams, who spent the week brainstorming with us. And Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. And he ended up really energizing the brainstorming sessions. I think it was my job pretty much to take the notes and figure out how we were going to turn this into a game. We decided pretty early on it would be a graphic adventure with puzzles. We wanted to make sure that people who hadn't seen the movie would be on equal footing with those who had. And so we wanted to stay true to the story and the tone of the story. And that was kind of the challenge. So this is kind of how the game looked. So let's stop for a sec. So what we ended up doing, and this was one of the ideas that Douglas had, was, has everyone seen the movie The Wizard of Oz, the one from 1939? Remember, it starts off in black and white. When you're in Kansas, it's black and white. When Dorothy makes it to Oz, everything's in full color. So Doug said, hey, why don't we do something like that? Let's start off as a text adventure, and once you end up in the Labyrinth universe, we'll come to full screen color. So here's the text adventure. Notice we have kind of a, we didn't have time to do a parser, which was pretty much the way all the graphic adventure games were being done at the time. We knew if we tried to do it on this really tight schedule we had, it would be a really bad parser, and parsers are already difficult to work with anyway because they tend not to, often don't know what word it is they're looking for. So we created what we call a slot machine interface, where you have on your left a list of the verbs, and then on the right would be your inventory, things you picked up. And you can go through and pretty quickly choose the command you want, but you know there's a very limited number of commands that would work. Once you finally make it into the movie, then we have David Bowie addressing you. You in the first row, whatever name you put in, addresses you. We've been watching you, we know everything there is to know about you. We even know of your weaknesses. These weaknesses made you my thrall. So he basically is taunting you, telling you that you have a specific amount of time to complete the adventure, and if you don't, then you lose the game. And I think that came from the movie also, the time limit, so we tried to pull that in. There's our player avatar walking into the labyrinth from the movie screen, and from this point on, we again reuse the same interface. We did kind of a scrolling, side scrolling. There's a scene we saw in the movie with the hands, and we did scaling cell animation. The same animation system was used within Skyman or later graphic adventure games, so we kind of pulled from that. Here, the character walks away, they'll scale downwards. And that's pretty much it. So, it's kind of tough to do that room here, but we kind of got it. So this is the end, and there's final confrontation, and go on. So the game came out. It did okay, but the movie didn't do that well. So it's hard to have a really successful game based on a movie that wasn't that successful. In terms of games being successful, I think it did better than that, but maybe because the movie wasn't a big hit. Activision didn't put a lot of money into marketing, so the game was kind of a hidden gem, maybe. Some people have great memories of it. Interestingly, the film became much more popular years later, and it's now a cult classic. So maybe we re-release the game, that'll be a cult classic too, I don't know. So here we are back in 1986, and we all packed up, and we get to move to Skywalker Ranch. And this was the brand new ranch that George had built in Marin County on, how many acres did he have? Is it like 5,000 acres? It's huge, really huge.
5,000 acres.
The address of the ranch is 5858. It's actually on a street called Lucas Valley Road. It was named Lucas Valley Road before George was even born, so it had nothing to do with that, but it was kind of an interesting coincidence. Watch for this address later on. This is the main house. George built it with a story, like he does everything with a story. So the idea was the house was built 150 years earlier. If you looked at the architecture, there are different types of architecture showing as if different additions have been added over the years. Inside the house is this great library. It's amazing, it's gorgeous. And watch for the staircase, this will show up again. So around this time, Ron Gilbert had been playing a lot of the Sierra Online games, and he made up a list of things that he thought were not great about it, things not to do. One was don't kill the player. And we this was one of my frustrations with that, with their games, is that, they would set up a way to die, often very, very arbitrary deaths that would happen pretty much constantly. So you have the whole thing is you save the game, do something, and die. Load the game, and it's basically took it out. It became very meta very, very fast. I remember seeing a broken mirror someplace, and I picked up a piece of glass from a broken mirror, cut myself, bled to death. And I mean, it happens all the time in real life. I just have to stay away from glass because if you pick it up, you'll die. So it just, yeah. No arbitrary puzzles. Try to make sure that we don't have rune logic from the previous talk. That if you get stuck on a puzzle and after you hear the answer, you think, I never would have thought of that solution in a million years, then I think it's a bit poorly designed puzzle. If you say, oh, I should have realized that, it's on me, then that's okay, and it's a good design. Ideally, you want the player to figure it out and not get frustrated, but at least it should be make sense. Also, no busy work. The idea, do you really enjoy cleaning bathrooms? If you don't enjoy cleaning bathrooms in real life, then you probably don't want to have the player have a chore within a graphic adventure game of cleaning the bathroom in order to find a hidden piece of something in the bathroom. Or if you know the player wants to go to this other room, don't make it really hard for them to do that. Reward intent. And no guess the parser. So
Yes.
The idea that you're limited to the words that the programmer thought of when he was doing the game. If you see a bush and you say, look under bush, and it says, I don't see a bush here. And you say, well, okay, he was looking for the word shrub or something. There's going to be some other names for it, but you might not be using the one you think of. And that's frustrating because, again, you're not rewarding the intent also. So Ron wrote this great article that's up on his website, grumpygamer.com, Why Adventure Games Suck. And he goes into greater detail, and it's really good. It kind of laid out the philosophy of the games, of later games after the first few. So basically building on the experience with Labyrinth, which Ron really wasn't a part of that. He wanted to create a game development environment that would make it easier to do adventures. The game he was going to work on or create was called Maniac Mansion. The engine is called Scum, which stood for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion. And there's the box. And some of the features of Scum were that you could, within the game, you could build sentences by pointing on the verb in the verb list and then an object on the screen. Rather than trying to drive the character with cursor keys, like you'd be driving a cursor around the screen, you could just click where you want the character to go and they self-navigate and walking around objects. You don't have to worry about that part, so we're kind of rewarding intent there. From the programming side, it was a multitasking system, so you could have these multiple scripts running in the background which keep track of very specific things. And he added this thing called a cutscene, which I think he named it cutscene, which essentially were non-interactive movies that advance the plot. Something might happen elsewhere in the game to kind of give you the feeling that this is a real universe, other things happening in parallel. And then again, for the programmers, an easy to understand scripting language. So for example, here's a script example, well, fake script example. I'm not sure this is actually from the game, but the idea there would be a command called walk actor, and the character's name one of the characters' names in Maniac Mansion was Razor. So walk actor Razor to object microwave oven, which was defined in the room. The character would then automatically walk to that position, finding their way there. Wait for actor. So we have a pause inside this script. And of course, it would walk during that pause. Everything else that was happening in the code would continue to run. Then when the actor got there, have her do an animation to reach out with her hand, wait a frame for her to do that, and then turn on the microwave oven and have her say a line. This ought to be interesting. And similar script example, here's a short script of how the clock would be ticking. And basically go through this loop over and over again, where you change the state, make a sound, wait 60 jiffies, which is a second, change the state again, play another sound, and then wait another 60 seconds, 60 jiffies, then this loop. So to get this to work, all you have to do in the enter code of the room is say start script clock tick and forget about it. And when you leave the room, the script would automatically die because it was a local script. So it made it really easy to add these little effects and things happening that you didn't have to keep on coding. Because Ron took about a year to work on the engine, the SCUM engine, Gary Winnick had plenty of time. This was designed by Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick. Gary had plenty of time to do some really great concept sketches to show how the game could look. These are this is the concept sketch of the family that you're going to be dealing with. Dr. Fred, there's Edna, Weird Ed, and their cousin Ted, who's a mummy. Some more concept art. The whole idea was the game was kind of a B-level horror movie. And in the box, turned out to be the first game we published ourselves. So we designed the box. Kind of got really